Hey everyone, in this video we'll be showing you how to get steamer projections, but this time in Python, and I'm using the IDE of Spyder, and I will show you, or I will link some tutorials on how to download Spyder and download Python in your local machine for Windows users. So if you have Thankfully, if you have a Mac, you already have Python, so just follow the instructions to download Spyder. But we're going to get started. So we're going to need 3 packages, and again, I'll show you I'll link a video on how to install different libraries, even though I'm talking in our language, but we're going to import 3 packages. The first one is JSON. The second one is pandas, and we're going to call it PD. And then the last one is requests. So now we're going to basically create a function called steamer projections. So we'll say define steamer projections, add a little colon to indicate, hey, we're going to create a function, and now we're going to add some URLs. Now we insert the URL listed right here. Feel free to pause if you want to type it up, but again, it will be on my GitHub page. And now we're going to basically pull a request to get the data from that URL, and then it's in JSON format, so then we're going to convert that JSON and put it into a data frame. So first thing we'll do, we'll call this B, call it whatever you want, but we'll run the request.get so we can get that request. Then we're going to do JSON loads, and we'll just say JSON loads that content of that request. And then to kind of convert it to a second data frame, just to go through the process, we'll say PD JSON normalize. So from pandas, basically it's taking a JSON flat file and adjusting how a JSON is formatted to then normalize it into a data frame so we can read and understand it a little bit better. Now what I'll do is take a few things and just copy them and kind of walk you through it. Make sure to tab that because Python is very particular about tabs. So what I'm doing here is essentially just renaming columns, and it's different in R than it is Python. So in R, when you want to name the new column, it goes first. However, in Python, the new column goes second. So here, one of the columns is named player IDs. Instead of we're naming it player ID, another column is player name. We're naming it name, another column, etc., so on and so forth. And then we're just selecting the columns that we want for this particular data set. And then we'll continue on. Again, I'll walk you through it. Each one. Except it seems like I am missing something here, but feel free to pause the video if you need to just type this out to help you better understand. So essentially what I'm doing here is taking each of these columns, and we'll do one for example here. So essentially I'm taking the average column, referencing it again, and saying, hey, I want this to be rounded to 3 decimal places. So that way we can pull in that data. And then I'm converting player ID to a string, so that way when we join from the 2023 data set, we get those combined data sets. So let me end this function for now by saying return df2. We'll call this test, and then just call steamer projections. So I'm going to highlight the whole thing, and run it. Should pop up here. Not sure if you can see this part of the screen, but feel free to click on it and look into it. So we have WAR, WRC plus, walk rate, strikeout rate, OPS, average, home runs, RBIs, games, and plate appearances. So based on this, it looks like Ronald Acuna Jr. will have the highest WAR, and Juan Soto will have the highest weighted runs created plus. So we'll combine it with 23 data and then go from there. Now we're going to add in another URL. So feel free to, again, pause the video. If you want to just type all of this out. But again, on my GitHub. So now we're going to continue. And what I'm going to do here is we're essentially going to do the same thing, but with a slight caveat. First thing is we're going to change df2 to df3, so that way there's a join constant. And then with this call, with the request call, it's kind of, the JSON is a little bit more split up, so to speak. Or combined, actually. Combined is the better way to say it. So you want to basically select from different types what you want. So instead of saying just JSON loads b.content, we're actually going to add data in there. Because again, it's split up based upon those different factors. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to obviously normalize our JSON. And then essentially do the same thing what I did earlier. So we're going to copy all of this. Again, feel free to pause it. I will actually comment some of these down so you can kind of see better. But essentially what we're doing here is we're renaming the columns again, but this time we're going to rename some of the columns that are similar to 2023. So underscore 23 is what I added for each of them. And then selecting the column. So why we only select player ID and not the team is because we're more concerned about the steamer projections. And so we'll just join on the player ID, so that way we just have their current team, or if they're still a free agent, they'll be on there, and what their projections are compared to what they did last year. And then on this end, let me make sure I tabulate all of these. Same thing, we're just rounding things. So in this case, we can say df average 23 equals df3 average 23, and we're going to round our data set to 3 decimal places. All right. So again, feel free to pause it if you want to take the time, write it out. Again, it'll be on my GitHub, but if you want to learn it this way, don't hesitate to pause. This is the beauty of having it on YouTube. You can pause and take as much time as you need to write it out. So now, we're going to create a final data frame. We'll just call it projections. And we're going to merge the second data frame that we created and the third data frame on what I mentioned earlier, the player ID. So that way we get the player ID for both the second data frame and the third data frame. So the steamer projections and what they did last year. And then we're going to create a couple of differences, and I'll walk this one through. So we'll create a column called weighted runs created plus difference. We'll say projections, WRC plus minus projections, WRC plus underscore 23. And that way we get the difference between the two. Feel free to add more, but we'll just do WRC plus and WAR. So WAR, replace all of those, and get WAR from last year. And then last but not least, I'm curious to see projections of just guys who will have or is projected to have at least 200 plate appearances in the next season. So, projections, PA, it's greater than or equal to 200. So now, highlight all of this, rerun it. Takes a second or two to run, and it should show up in your environment. So, Variable Explorer, except the issue that we ran across is we didn't have it return anything. So it's just saying a none type object. So we return the projections with that semicolon. And let's rerun it again. And now, feel free to click on this up here. So double click on it. It should pull up a data frame. Feel free to expand it. But now you see every player stats, walk rate, strikeout rate, WRC plus, WAR, what the difference is compared to what they did last year and this year, how many games they played. So obviously, if you haven't seen already, Steamer only projects up to 150 games. So if you wanted to add something like WAR per game and see those differences, you could do that as well. So like we can click on, let's click on WRC plus difference. So like a guy like, if you look at this again, make sure you double click on it. Like P. Crow Armstrong, he barely played last year, but he's projected to play a ton this year. He's going to have a high uptick in WRC plus. He's projected at 91, and his was negative 32 last year, but again, in limited time. Let's take a guy who actually played a lot. So like Colton Wong, he had 250 plate appearances and a WRC plus of 48. However, this year he's projected to have 266 plate appearances and a WRC plus of 93. And so it's interesting to look at it this way. You know, some other guys, so like if you go to WAR difference real quick, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had a 1 win above replacement. However, according to Steamer next year, he's projected to have a 4.1 wins above replacement figure. And the WRC plus is going up from 118 to projected 144. But again, if you're confused, double click this data set to be able to see your data frame and be able to play around with it. But thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this Python video. So my goal with this channel is to do a little bit of R, a little bit of Python, and factor in both. But thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.